Just earlier this month, the National Medical Commission, a government body of course, has come out with those guidelines for the professional conduct of doctors, in which there was a mandate as well. It was introduced to prescribe only generic drugs instead of specific branded drugs. It faced a lot of opposition from the Indian Medical Association, citing issues like quality checks, about how impractical the entire operation would be. But as we talk about it right now, the government has rolled back those guidelines. So, what is in it for pharma companies? Is there a loss for patients, for consumers at the end of the day? We're going to take this up with the experts joining us. But first, let's get the details out of this withdrawal as well. And for that, my colleague Samir Dixit is joining us from Delhi. Samir, do tell us, it was something that created a lot of opposition, a lot of debate on both sides, whether doctors should go ahead and prescribe only generic drugs and not branded drugs. Now, of course, the entire set of guidelines have been withdrawn by the National Medical Commission. Tell us what led to it.
Yes, definitely. This year on this month, on 2nd of August, the NMC National Medical Commission, they came up with a guideline. Then it was clearly mentioned by NMC that the doctors or the registered medical practitioners, they have to mention generic medicine to their patient. On if not generic, then non-proprietary or pharmacological medicine will be prescribed to the patients. And if not doing so, then they may face some sort of strict action, which includes that suspension of license for up to 30 days. So that was a strict sort of guideline that was issued by NMC, and mentioning of generic medicine was the biggest clause. And then post the guidelines were released, there was a huge uproar. There was a opposition that was led by IMA, the Indian Medical Association. IMA clearly opposed the move, and many other concerned stakeholders also joined the wagon. For example, the pharma lobby that went in and opposed the move of government, even the pharmaceutical associations, they were also a part of this group, those who were opposing this entire move by NMC of mentioning generic medicines as mandatory for the patient. And when this tussle was going on between IMA and NMC, seeking that sort of atmosphere, an important meeting was held this week itself, and that meeting was also attended by Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia. Then the government gave it a sort of an indication that whatever the clause which are non-acceptable sort of thing, or which are creating tension between the medical stakeholder, it will be reviewed. And now a review, or the government has entirely rolled back the decision. The NMC has came up with a new notification and has mentioned that this clause will not be followed by the registered medical practitioner. Generic medicine clause has been removed. IMA biggest point was that the mentioning of generic medicines is not practically possible for a couple of reasons. For example, generic medicine is not available at all the cities across length and breadth of the country. Moreover, the generic medicines are limited in number, in terms of quantity, and even quality is something which is questionable. So on these sort of grounds, the IMA was opposing the entire move. And after understanding the whole situation, now the government has rolled back the decision.
Indeed, they have, and we are going to assess and understand exactly the two sides of this entire debate. Thanks very much, Samir, for filling us in. We had a word earlier with Jayesh Lely as well. Now, Jayesh Lely is the Vice President of the Indian Medical Association, the IMA, and he's spoken to us about there being a lack of standardization in testing and in approval procedures. Listen into what he said.
It is also accepted that the so-called generic medicines are little cheaper, but in fact on that various studies have shown that the generic medicines which are available in the market at the moment are not up to the standards, are not up to the clarity wise. Essentially they can match the performance, they can match the effectiveness on the branded drugs. Definitely branded drugs play a major role in the life of the serious patients. Writing down a big name, writing down the combinations, and specially kind of a B complex or specially diabetic and hypertension, arthritis, there are so many medicines are available, and that their actual pharmacological name is so long, and to write down that particular name will be very difficult in the practice. Pharma lobby, definitely they have put in lot of research, they have put in lot of efforts in bringing the very good quality of the drugs, very good machinery, very good chain supply of transmitting the medicines, all those very important things we cannot forget, and we should definitely abide and help the pharma companies also simultaneously and request them to bring down the rates, which will be helpful for the patients. At the same time, the purity will be maintained.
So there is mention of quality over there. There is mention of being standardized as well, and the need for that to happen. The higher prices of branded drugs as opposed to generic drugs, now that is also a moot point. That was the reason why perhaps this was part of the guidelines. Let's discuss this with consumer activist Rekha Aggarwal is joining us, along with lawyer Murali Neelakantan. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Rekha Agarwal, now that the government has withdrawn the guidelines that were put out by the National Medical Commission, tell us, what do you think are the reasons of this withdrawal? Doctors prescribing generic drugs to patients rather than those drugs with brand names. How important was that from a consumer perspective?
From a consumer perspective, what I can say over here, that a consumer is entitled to receive value for money. So if he goes to a doctor, and it is a fundamental right to have the right to health, the right to good health and the right to life is a fundamental right which is enshrined in the Constitution of India. So every person who falls sick, every patient has the right to get the best services from a doctor, and it's the duty of the doctor to prescribe the right medicines. Having said that, a balance needs to be drawn between the vast difference in prices between the generic medicines and the branded medicines. As the earlier speaker, Mr. Lele, said, that sometimes the composition of the salt or the generic medicines is so long that it is difficult for a doctor to prescribe that. And there may be dispute regarding the quality of that generic medicine. So what I think that at the moment, the need of the hour is to see that there is a balance between the rights of the patients to get the right medicines, which will not affect his health, and at the same time not compromise on the quality, and the right of the pharma companies to do their business and earn their livelihood and make profit. So I think that the reason why the National Medical Council has withdrawn the suggestion that they had made that only generic medicines can be prescribed, that was again against the fundamental rights which are in the Constitution. That is the right to a good health and the right to earn money by the pharma companies. So if by one stroke of a pen, the right of the pharma companies was taken away to run the medical profession by their choice, you can't put dictates on any professional, a doctor or a lawyer or any teacher, that you must do your business in a particular manner. So a doctor also has the right to prescribe a particular branded medicine if he or she thinks that this is just the right medicine for my patient. But at the same time, the patient also has a right to buy only those, he cannot be forced to buy medicines which are expensive just because the doctor thinks that they are the right medicines. So it is the tussle between the branded and the non-branded.
No,
So
fair
I
enough.
think that the pharma companies, when they protested,
Yes.
I think the basic reason that they protested was that, it was a big dent on their pockets. But as far as the doctors are concerned, I think that they could have drawn a balance between prescribing a branded medicine and at the same time also giving
But
the
that
choice
hasn't
to the
happened. And Murali Neelakantan, do
buy
come.
generic medicine.
Yes, it hasn't happened. Murali Neelakantan, do tell us from a legal perspective, how difficult is it to be able to draw the kind of balance that Rekha Agarwal is talking about between quality and, of course, the right to good health that a consumer, a patient is entitled to?
I don't want to get into philosophical discussions, and I suspect that Rekha Agarwal is not a lawyer. I hope she isn't, because pharma companies don't have a fundamental right to own a brand. So I don't know where she gets all this from, but I suspect that that's not relevant to this discussion.
Rekha
I will
Agarwal, we'll
address.
come back to you. I'll come back to you. But do finish your point, sir.
So this is not about balance. The rule that was announced in August this year was not dramatically different from what has already existed. So for a very long time, we've already had, under the old version of the professional ethics rules, that the generic name and the brand name can be used. There was nothing against it. That continues. The fact that Mr. Lele thinks it's too difficult for doctors to remember drugs, I'm shocked. There are doctors around the world who prescribe in Western Europe, for example, all the prescriptions are the INN or generic name. Nobody has died, and doctors haven't claimed that it is impossible to remember names of medicines. So I think these are the kind of flimsy arguments that annoy activists and make doctors look terrible. So that's not the issue. Uh, the If at all the NMC wanted to enforce this, it could have done it in the way it already has, which is you have the name of the drug plus you have a recommended brand. Just having a generic doesn't make sense in India because doctors don't believe that brand substitution is a good thing. So again, when we say generics, it's not as if there are nameless drugs. That's a very small part of the market, not relevant to this discussion. What we mean here is substitution of brands. So if I use brand A in the prescription, who decides whether the patient get brand A or can substitute it with a similar brand B? Now, the doctor's view, of course, is that the chemist shouldn't be allowed to do it and doctors should only do it. So those are the discussions we need to be having. The fact that it's a long name, there's a fundamental right of pharma companies. I was global general counsel for 2 global pharma companies.
Right.
And I would be ashamed to say something like this in court.
Right. So as far as practicality is concerned, that is an argument that Mr. Neelakantan is throwing out of the window. Rekha Agarwal, what do you say?
I think I strongly differ with what the other speaker said. First of all, I would like to stand, like to put it on record that I'm not just a consumer activist, I'm also a lawyer who's been practicing on the consumer courts for the last 30 years or more. So I think that my point was not well taken or well understood. I never said that the pharma companies have a right to sell brands. I said the pharma companies have a right to sell medicines by whatever name that they want. It is up to the wisdom of the doctor to prescribe a particular medicine which he thinks may be right for the patient. But at the same time, I finished my earlier, dialogue by stating that the doctor should prescribe not only the brand name of his choice, but he also has a right to, and he has a duty cast upon him to write the generic medicine. So if he's suggesting a particular brand, it is up to the patient. If it suits his pocket, he can buy that, that fancy branded, medicine. But if it doesn't suit his pocket, and if he thinks that, or rather he doesn't want to waste his money, he can buy a generic medicine, which he can buy off the counter. But then he has to rely upon the wisdom of the chemist, who will, it is the wisdom of the chemist who will say that, okay, fine, this medicine is a substitute for that particular branded medicine. So I think that the patient who is gullible or who is not educated may sometimes, fall prey to what the chemist is suggesting. An educated patient, for example, when I have gone to buy medicines which are branded and which are very expensive, I've immediately asked the chemist to suggest me another cheaper medicine which has got the same salt. And I have compared both the medicines, the branded one with the non-branded one, and then decided to buy the non-branded one if there is a big difference in the pricing. So what my point is, as I said, that I'm not at all advocating the cause of pharma companies. I just said that the pharma companies have a right to put in the market any medicine with any fancy brand name, but it is for the doctors to draw a balance that they should not force a patient to consume only that particular medicine and then later blame him that, oh, why did you not buy that particular medicine? Why did you go for the other substitute, which is not of a very good quality, according to the wisdom of the doctor?
Mr. Neelakantan,
So what
if you had to reframe, taking away from the points that Rekha Agarwal is making, if you had to reframe the guidelines, as it were, to draw a better balance, how exactly would you go about it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. So I'm in this strange position of actually defending the NMC on this. If you have the chemical name and you have the brand name, it helps the doctors in case the patient goes off like she did and wants to change the brand. It is not just the chemical name. In India, we know that even generics and branded generics are not identical. They could have different excipients. They could have different other elements in it other than the drug itself. And therefore, there are changes as a result of that. And that is the concern of doctors, that you may go to the chemist and have a great discussion by an informed patient with a very, very kind chemist, and you could end up with a drug that causes a reaction, and you'd come back and lynch the doctor. Now, this is actually to protect the doctors and said, I suggested brand A, you went off and did brand B. Now, if things go wrong, don't come back and, lynch me and beat me up and do all the things
Yeah.
that you guys do. So the earlier version and the current version, the only difference was that there was a threat that it would be enforced and you'd lose a license. Other than that, fundamentally, they weren't very different. I think doctors have
And
realized
are
that
those penalties important? Penalizing, is it important? Mr.
uh,
Neelakantan.
I think it is, because you're giving the choice to the doctor and the patient and that relationship to decide, rather than now, if you only had to do a generic name, which I'm not a fan of, the incentive is on the chemist, and the chemist is going to give you the drug on which he makes the maximum margin.
Right.
Unlike in Western Europe, you go to the UK, you go to Europe, chemists don't get a margin. They get a dispensing fee, which means that whether the drug is 1,000 rupees or it is 10,000 rupees or 20 rupees, they get a fixed fee per prescription.
Right.
And therefore, if we get that done in India, and it's the same everywhere, right? I mean, you use a toll road, you don't pay toll based on the price of your car. I mean, you'd get laughed out if you did that.
Yes.
Or you paid a courier fee based on the value of the book or whatever it is that you are couriering, you get laughed out. I mean, that's not the basis for a courier company or a toll road to work. Why should it be different for a retail store where they get a percentage of the MRP? It makes no sense at all. So
Right.
if you fix these three things, then it's beneficial for the patient and it protects the doctor.
Rekha Agarwal, in conclusion, if you were to kind of assess the importance of how a consumer stands to benefit most when it comes to the pricing, ensuring quality, you did speak about the right to good health. If that was what was top of mind, what were the kind of changes that you would have expected as far as this version goes that has now been withdrawn of the NMC guidelines?
I think the NMC should have specified should not have taken away the rights of the doctors to prescribe any branded medicine. I mean, you cannot, give do's and don'ts to a doctor. He has the right to run his profession the way he wants. But having said that, there should have been a rider to that a doctor can prescribe any medicine of his choice, whether it is branded or non-branded, but he must specify the salt also and the generic medicine which he's prescribing. So had this rider been there, that the doctor has a duty to a right to prescribe any medicine of his choice, but he also has a duty to spell out the salt. I said in such a situation, I think that the patient would have been well informed, and his fundamental right to good health would not have been taken away. So I think that ultimately one has to protect the consumer, but because it is the consumer who's got a right to value for money, the best goods and the best services. Since the doctors are also prescribing medical services which come under the purview of the Consumer Protection Act 2019. So I think that the patient rights are supreme, but at the same time, I do not take away the rights of the doctors also to run their profession in the way that they want. So a balance needs to be drawn, as I said earlier.
Well, as things stand, as far as those guidelines are concerned, they have been withdrawn, and we'll see what happens next on this front. But of course, it's an important debate, and both sides fairly represented. Murali Neelakantan and Rekha Agarwal, many thanks for joining us with your perspective on this edition of India Tonight. Appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you.